Okay, kia ora everybody. Welcome
Hello.
to Dock Edge School's screening of We Believe in Dinosaurs. This is the third and final screening of We Believe in Dinosaurs, and we're lucky enough to have the filmmakers Monica Longross and Amy uh, coming to talk with us after about some of the issues, because these are big issues. These are controversial issues, which many educators shy away from because they're so polarizing. But I think in earlier conversations, Alicia, that you and I and the filmmakers have had is that it's more important to talk about the issues as they arise rather than ignore them and let them bubble to the surface and have
Yeah,
some strong conflict.
yeah, absolutely.
Would love to thank Ray Foundation. Ray Foundation make the entire Dockage Schools program possible, and would also like to thank all of the Dockage staff who have made this very difficult but successful transition from theatres to online this year. And I'd particularly like to thank Alicia Dar, who is the school's coordinator, for being instrumental in making that happen. Still waiting on a few people to join us, but I believe that we will have Auckland Uni Psychology Department Michelle Burstle, as well as some of the students from the department, and Kamohai Nicola Muir join us as well. So we are very thankful for you taking time out of your day, but also making you aware that you're able to watch these films at any point up until July 3rd. But we're looking at extending the program. We'll keep you posted on that. Uh, what else, Alicia? What am I forgetting?
I think you've got it pretty sus. Um, yeah, it's a really interesting film. You know, New Zealand is very heavily tourism focused, so it's good to learn about something where I suppose, well, I mean, the separation between religion and state, but like, oh, I don't want to give away spoilers. But it's really, yeah, it's really interesting from a tourism perspective whether this um whether this like park would actually be good for the economy, be good for the community or not. And well, we're about to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some big questions in there about civics, economy, society, separation of church and state, freedom of religion, and all of these things, and about holding on to the old ways of doing things rather than looking forward to the new ways of doing things. I seem to have lost my camera, but from the magic of technology, hopefully you can still hear me. Ah, there we go.
Here we are. Every time you bring it up, it turns it back on.
It's like, oh, that's it. He's talking about me. He's talking about me.
Camera one, camera one.
Camera one.
Yeah.
Yes, so keep this tab open. Alicia has posted in the chat the link to the film. If you have any tech questions or any tech problems, she's also posted our email addresses. We can help sort you out if you have trouble playing the film. But for the moment, if you click on that link in the chat, schools.dockedge.nz, film, We Believe in Dinosaurs, and then hover your cursor over that play now button. And on three, we'll count down and play together, and then reconvene back here afterwards for the Q&A. So, playing now. 3, 2, 1, go. And then you'll just push play again when the file comes up. Okay, we'll see you back after the show. Enjoy. Kia ora, everybody. Welcome back. Come and join us in the webinar jam room. We're about to speak with Monica Longross and Amy Ellison, filmmakers, to discuss the film. We've got a couple of minutes before we have teachers and students back in. Hey, how you doing, Alicia? Hey, Monica. Nice to see you. I feel like my widescreen is a bit wide. My fridge is very visible in the background.
It's all the framing, you know. It's like I should get over.
Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for this screening of We Believe in Dinosaurs with Dockage Schools. Dockage Schools is made possible through the Ray Foundation, and also the hard work of all of the Dockage staff, including Alicia Adair, who's the Dockage Schools coordinator, as well as the filmmakers who provide us these wonderful films, as well as the teachers and students who join us to have these great conversations, which I think in today's modern age are vital. We need to discuss the issues before they come to points of conflict. So, Monica, great job on the movie. What was the most challenging aspect of deciding how the narrative would go? Like there are a lot of threads in there. There's the employment issue, there's the science versus religion, there's the economic factor of those small towns who need to reach as many people with the most grandiose things to make them a unique selling point in modern America where biggest is best. What were some of the challenges that you faced?
Well, you know, organizing the story is always difficult when you have a big story like this. We cast a wide net, and when we first start out, we interview all kinds of people. And I think one of the surprises to us and major challenge was getting scientists to talk to us. When we first were casting, we wanted all these voices from Kentucky and from that area. And the scientists, it's very difficult for a scientist to talk about religion. They are nervous about sounding intolerant, and they know that they might get in trouble. And so they say, oh, we just don't want to go there. The institutions like the local in Cincinnati Science Museum, they're reticent about talking because of their funders, that they have some of the same funders that the Glacier Museum has. It's their community, and they don't want to say anything that might alienate people. So that was a shock that we the creationists would talk to us readily, but the scientists were difficult to get them to say anything. So I think it made it a stronger film because we decided that we were going to do characters and we were going to follow them and we were going to stick with the story, which was the building of the ark. And so we corralled that in, and we really didn't need, we felt that it was a stronger story than having scientists tell us about the science, about evolution and those kinds of things. So it turned out that that was probably a blessing in disguise. But when we first go out, we talk to everyone and anyone who talked to us. And the creationists were very open and very sophisticated in their PR. And so they spoke to us readily. So yes, it was a matter of staying with the story, which is the building of the ark, and the people of Kentucky who are affected by this. And then the story pretty much wrote itself. It's always a big idea and you have to corral it in. So as the writer, I'm always working on how to do that. Those were the challenges and in this story. So.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
we had,
certainly. Sorry, you go ahead, Amy.
gonna
Okay.
say we had 100 hours of footage, I think, that Monica and Clayton were trying to place into a storyline. And so that was that was a lot. So, and it also took 5 years to make it. So a lot of it is time and just sort of culling through all of that footage, which I think Monica and Clayton became so familiar with. They quote from things that aren't even in the film anymore.
That's part of the wide net, is the amount of footage we end up with.
Yeah, and I mean this is a common theme through a lot of filmmakers that we speak with, is that to actually create a story of depth and to investigate what's beneath the surface, it takes a long time and uh, a lot of money. Like how would you budget? Like I don't envision that you I don't imagine that you envisioned shooting for 5 years, right? How can you walk us through the process of what the original concept was to how that differed from what it took to make the final product?
Say something about that, producer there.
Well, sure. I mean, in the beginning, the story, Monica and Clayton were very interested in trying to tackle this idea of the theory of evolution and the fact that in the United States, the theory of evolution is challenged right and left. It's of the industrialized nations, the United States has one of the least acceptance rates of the theory of evolution. So that was very interesting to them from the very beginning, as soon as they heard that the Ark was going to be built. So we started to ask Answers in Genesis, which is the organization, the parent organization that built the Ark, about the building of it, if we could come and shoot the film and come and get some footage and some interviews. And initially they said no, because they said someone else was already making a documentary about it. And as it turns out, that documentary kind of fell away. And so just by virtue of us continuing to show up and come to some events that were outside of the Ark itself, but we went to the International Conference on Creationism in Pittsburgh and met people there who then we interviewed, and then they were connected to Answers in Genesis. Georgia Purdom, who's one of the first of the creation scientists that we hear from in the film. And so from there, we were able to kind of follow that track. But financially, we're a nonprofit documentary film company. And so a lot of our money comes from individual supporters. A lot of our money comes from grants. And so that was just sort of a continuous process year after year to find different avenues of funding. Sometimes, as you do as filmmakers, you just kind of put yourself out there and hope for reimbursement later. So we did a fair amount of that. But it was the nonprofit route in the United States means that people can give to us without having to pay taxes on the amount that they give. And that's becoming a more difficult process to go through. And I'm finding that more and more documentary filmmakers are actually not really even trying to, they may do it through sort of an allied nonprofit, but they themselves don't work within the nonprofit. But that's sort of been our model, is to actually be part of this nonprofit called 137 Films, which I am proudly wearing the t-shirt for right now. But yeah, so t-shirt sales, that also helped. Just every possible way that we could get money to continue, we did.
And our board, we certainly, by having him there, when we had money straits, we would go to them and they would very helpfully either write checks or get other organizations or family foundations to give money to us. So yeah, it's a process of, especially when you're following a story, there's times when you can't wait for the money to catch up. You just have to get in a vehicle, because we're in Chicago, and you have to get to Kentucky, and you just have to keep shooting it and hope that the money's going to follow you. And I know that all documentary filmmakers have problems with this. It's it's a rough world out there, and with this, what's happening right now with COVID and that, I'm sure that foundations and others are going to have other things to give their money to, and it's going to be even more difficult, I would say. So this kind of gonzo filmmaking where you just don't give up and you just go out there, and like I said, especially when there's a story and something's happening, you can't say, well, we don't have the money to do that. So we do the kind of thing that people do. You pull out your own credit card and you go and you do things and you hope the money will catch up with you. And we did that, especially when you're going over so many years. We did that. So.
Sorry, you go, Anne.
Oh, the only thing that I was going to say is that, I mean, if people are interested in making a documentary film, the two things that people are going to be looking for in order for you to raise money, whether you're going to be talking to investors who are going to expect to get paid back after the film's done, or whether you're talking to a nonprofit organization or a foundation that's going to give you money, they're going to want to know what your access is, how complete is that access to the subject, and they're going to want to see initial footage. So you have to get some seed footage somewhere, almost always. It's very difficult to get any money from anyone unless you can show them some of your own footage. They're not going to want to see footage that other people shot unless you're making a film entirely from archival footage, which does happen, and I expect to happen more over the next year or so as people. But I have a feeling that films that are made, particularly right now in the United States when we have COVID, and we also have this uprising around the rights of Black people, and the fact that there are so many people out there with phones who are collecting amazing footage. And so I really have a strong sense that that's going to be the future of documentary for the next couple of years, is it's going to be based on archival and just what you shoot with your phone. So you can really, I think, be able to do a lot with that. You just have to demonstrate to funders that you have access and that you already have footage and that you have an eye for how to use that footage.
Absolutely. Like, sorry, you go, Monica.
Editing. I was going to say, you don't show raw footage. It means that it has to go through a process and it has to look what we call pretty to show to people, because you don't just shoot out raw footage. So if there's students who want to learn about that's the process. You have to have an edited 2 or 3 scenes in order to go and show investors and others and to get the money. So that's the process.
Those are all fantastic tips. I'm sure all of the media studies students are going to be very grateful for the the background info there. I mean, it certainly helps that you had an end point. The actual finished product of the arc is a great finish to your story. Well, I mean, at least wrapping up of where the story has got to that point. But as you described, the COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement there in the States, it seems like it's an ongoing thing, and there's no easy stake in the ground that you can be like, oh yeah, that'll wrap in 2 months or 5 months or 5 years. What advice would you have to people who are kind of in this moment in time that could stretch out or could tangent off in many different ways? How would you approach making a film about either of those subjects?
Well, I know that Clayton and I often talked about no matter what is happening, we have to find an ending. Whatever your story is, it goes on and on. Like, we went back to Williamstown to see how they were doing a year afterwards, because we were editing at the time, and we wanted to know, did any of the promises that were made to them come to fruition? And so, but we were still editing, and we were getting we were looking for a buyer and getting into festivals, and it's very tempting to go back and check that what you did was right. And so every story we've ever had, like the first film we did was called The Atom Smashers, and it was about the search for the Higgs boson, which some people probably know what that is now because they found it at CERN. And it was about a small collider in the US that was still the largest in the world at the time versus CERN that was being built. And people asked us, well, isn't your film about finding the Higgs boson? What if they don't find the Higgs boson? What are you going to do? And we said, well, we're going to end the film. And the film will be the story of the hunt for the Higgs boson. I mean, and I would say right now in this movement, to those who've got their camera out or their phone out and they're out there filming this, you should have a story in mind. And the story could be that you're following someone, or you're following a city, or you're a town, or you're following parts of the story, that you're not dependent on, well, what really happened there. I'm sure that there are cameras in laboratories right now that are trying to find a vaccine for the whole world. I'm sure that there's some money behind that, and National Geographic or some other big funder is out there funding this kind of thing. So I'm sure someone's following that. And that's what the kind of thinking that we do, because we have found stories that the bigger they are, like we were thinking of the new space race and that kind of thing. And we found, of course, that you have to see what's in the pipeline. What is somebody else doing? And there are big funders. If it's a big story, there's going to be funders out there who are already on that trail. And global warming, there were several documentaries out about global warming. So we realized that not many people were paying attention to the theory of evolution and the war on the theory of evolution that's been going on for a long time. And so that was our story to tell. And like Amy said, we first heard that there was another documentary company doing the ark, but they turned out to be not well funded, and it went away. They were creationists. And so we thought, even if they are, we're taking a whole different tack. So we're going to proceed with this, because there wasn't a lot. We couldn't look around and say, uh-oh, there's 4 films being made up. Now, I'm sure there's going to be Black Lives Matter films, and there's going to be COVID films. But if you start locally and you see something for your students in New Zealand, or a town in New Zealand, or a family that is going through something, then start there. Start where you are and where the story is, and then you don't have to really worry, are we ever going to have an ending to this, or is the ending a vaccine? Now, you may, like us, be still working on it for a long time, and you may say, the vaccine came in here, I think we have to cover that a little bit. But you might not. You might still have a story of, and a documentary is a document of a time. And that's what you're doing. And we're going through, whether you live in New Zealand or you live in Iowa in the United States, you're going through interesting times. And to document that and to tell your story, or your town's part of that story, that's really important. And I think that a lot of those smaller films are going to come out. And if you find heart and pull at the heartstrings and the brain of your audience, then you might break through too. Don't always think, well, the big guys are telling this big story about those. I'm sure there's several in the United States are going to come out, but you go for what you bring and the originality that you bring to what's going on. So don't worry about, you need the big ending. You need the vaccine, or you need Higgs boson to be found. I do have a story about that I really love, is that I was sitting in a restaurant in New York with my children, and we had made this film, and we had some of the top scientists in the United States in this film, the physicists from Fermilab in the United States, but they also work at CERN as well. And I got a text on my phone that said from one of these physicists, there's going to be a big announcement tomorrow. I'm not supposed to tell anyone, but I will. And I said to the people at the table, I think I've just been told that they found the Higgs boson. And everyone said, what? Why? Why you? And I said, oh, you my documentary. So I was told beforehand, and I really love that. But we didn't, there's another film that covered the finding of the Higgs boson at CERN. Another film, another documentary. So that's my advice.
That's great. What are your thoughts there, Amy?
Well, I would say that one of my teachers in film school said that there is no bad story in the hands of a good storyteller, and it really doesn't matter the size or scale of what you're doing, as long as you have a firm way of telling it, and as long as you let your voice guide that story. The specificity of who you are as a filmmaker, if you can let that be one of the main elements of your film, then there is no small story to any of what's going on. These are huge issues that we're facing around the world and in the United States. I live in the city of Chicago, and we are facing tons of issues here right now that seem very heightened. And I am so excited by seeing the small little films that I have a 15-year-old son, and he's constantly showing me things that his friends are making, or that people that he knows are making, going out into protests and being involved and telling things from their point of view. And I do think that some element of the future of documentary filmmaking is going to be, it might be shorter, it might be sort of more immediate, but there are some elements to it that are going to become more democratic as well, as this immediacy and the ability to tell a story in a strong way starts to kind of burble up and make things really interesting and go viral. So I'm very hopeful about that, because it really has revealed so much about our country, about our world. And so I'm excited to see where that avenue takes things into the future of documentary filmmaking.
I do love the form, both short and long, and I think both of you and Clayton have done spectacularly well to make this long form of, excuse the pun, the evolution of ideas and showing the progression of the arc as well as people's uh, resistance to it on many levels. Um, I I really value the fact that you make films to spark conversation, and even during this Black Lives Matter um, issue, people get stuck in a very one-sided point of view, and to have a 5 or a 10 or a 15 minute um, short to show and say this is someone else's point of view. Like for instance, there was one I showed someone who had the very reasonable point of view that they'd worked hard all of their life and they didn't come from privilege, even though that they had. And I showed her a 5 minute clip of at the starting line those who had certain privileges, not based on race or not based on anything that they'd done, got to take 2 steps forward and start the race 10 steps ahead of some of the other people. And then they looked around and all of the people at the starting line or a couple of steps back were black. So it's that kind of visual representation. It's those representations of ideas that really help people understand their world better from a different perspective. So yeah, we're very grateful to you for bringing both perspectives in there. I mean, there was certainly your voice and your point of view came across very clearly, but you've got to be collaborative with both or multiple points of view. Did you find that you said that the Creationist documentary dropped away? Did you get requests from the Genesis people to share your footage or to somehow contribute to their PR at all?
No, we did not. I would say that they have people working for them. They have quite a crew. They do a television show that is a news of the Ark, and they record that and put them up. If you go to their website, you will see Ken Ham does a video blog where he often gives, and it's very, they make commercials, they do all kinds of things that are very sophisticated. So I can only think that they have a very sophisticated team working for them or with them. We did see people with cameras when we were there from the Ark. There was in the film, there was the crew that had the what do they call them? I'm blanking out the word that
A drone or a crane or
above us who were taking it on the.
Yeah.
We had going over our heads with cameras on them. So, and that was from the Ark. So I would say they have a lot of sophisticated equipment, and they didn't need us, And
Eric did ask if he could access some of our footage at one point. Eric was the protester who was protesting the protest. So yeah, so he did ask at one point.
And we because he might use it for purposes that are not the same as we believe in. So we got asked to use some of our Fermilab footage after the Atom Smashers, and we decided no. And we've been asked before from several organizations, and we usually say, no, we have a real strong voice and point of view, and to see some of that footage used maybe in a completely different way, we're not sure of that, because we don't set out to make fun of anyone. We try to be very respectful. We want our subjects to recognize themselves. And that is true of the scientist, Dan, and of David. We need to respect him. So there's all these different voices, and you give your footage to someone who's partisan. You don't know what they're going to do with those people. So we make a choice not to. But the Ark themselves, the AIG, Answers in Genesis, they never asked. So we didn't have that dilemma kind of thing. So.
Oh, so we're getting close to time, but I think I've asked you this in every session. What advice or what conversations would you recommend young people to have who have been brought up in a Christian tradition, love thy neighbor and do unto others as they would have done to you, who suddenly see this and the Christians in this are not necessarily painted in the most positive light, but it's quite revealing about a broader context behind them. What would you say to young Christians who are seeing this different point of view for the first time?
Well, as I've said before, we've made a film about science and the pressures on science. And many of our audiences, though, are Christian, and they do ask about whether, and they've even characterized the film about being about faith and about faith versus science. And our goal was never to say that there wasn't a place in the world for faith and for religion. In fact, we were very careful, and we had the Baptist pastor in the film who says that he believes that God created this world and has a plan for this world, but he sees he thinks that science informs his religion, and he has no problem there, one and the other going like this. And for many a mainstream, I think the advice I give is you ought to check with your pastors and have a discussion about that, because many mainstream churches, including the Catholics and many of the Christian faiths, do not require that you choose between your faith and science, and that you have to repudiate the theory of evolution. Within those, we've talked to many pastors, and within those churches, there are a few people who believe that they have to have believe in a literal Bible, that everything in it must be true rather than great truths in poetic form, but it has to be literally true. And there are old earth creationists and young earth creationists, and this particular group is a young earth creationist. So I think you need to have that discussion with yourself and your friends and your pastors of what you think Christianity demands of you. And it's like David, the character in there, so many students, when we were traveling with this to festivals, would come up and say, I am David. And they are struggling because their parents believe one thing and they've come to believe something else. And that I really feel if students are in that position, because my church never asked me to make that choice between the two. And so I was in sync with my parents. I didn't have to rebel against them. And I think that's a tough position to be in. And David was in that position, and he had a hard time. We had a very hard time getting David to talk about it because it was so problematic for him. He's older now, and he'll talk about it now. But when we were going through this, he didn't want to hurt his parents' feelings, and so I realized that all of that's there. But you may be surprised to learn, as David was, that your faith does not require you to repudiate evolution or the age of the earth, or to believe that dinosaurs and humans lived at the same time. You might not have to literally believe in Genesis to the point where you have to go as far as Answers in Genesis. So check that out. Have a discussion. Nobody's asking you to say, oh, throw away your faith. Science, 2 members of our board are Catholics. So check that out. Have a discussion.
Sounds good. Amy, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I agree with everything that Monica just said. I think that what's interesting is that we often have audiences who ask, how can people continue to believe this in the face of so much scientific evidence? And one of the things that I always point out is the fact that this is so tied up with identity and how people just even think of themselves. They think of themselves as part of not just Christianity, but a certain sect of Christianity that is somewhat persecuted, and that they are very tied up in maintaining these beliefs. I mean, you can see the film and see just like the psychological just real estate that they invest in this idea. And that's so much, you have sort of some costs at that point when you have spent so much time and money and resources maintaining an idea and maintaining a community of people that's so much part of your identity. I think that I would, similarly to Monica in saying that, science and religion, in my view, and in many people's view, that they aren't mutually exclusive, but that also just to ask to what degree, as Monica said, what is Christianity truly asking of you? Is it asking you to behave in a certain way or to love people in a certain way? Or is it asking you to believe certain things about science? And so which of those things are the most important aspects of being a Christian? And in what ways can science tell us something about what it means to be human, and religion can tell us something about what it means to be human, and how can those two things coexist? And I think, too, that for people who see the film who don't believe the creationist viewpoint, but who are surprised by the number of people who do, and are surprised by their political heft and their political power, then I would say to those people that they need to know what their elected officials believe about the issue. They especially need to look at their local legislative bodies, whether that's a state legislative body or a town council or whoever it is that decides the curriculum for your school, to see what it is they believe on these issues, because that is sort of a bedrock idea. It's one of the foundational scientific ideas, is the theory of evolution. And if that gets questioned early on, and if that is thought to be something that's just completely untrue, then it makes other science easy to question. And so that's when I talk to people who don't have that conflict about science and religion, but who are concerned about the people who hold on to that so tightly, then that's the advice that we always give, is to talk to the elected officials in your school board and see where they stand on this issue, and see how much evolution is being taught in your school.
That's great. Alicia, sorry, I've been chatting. Have you got any thoughts? Have you got any questions?
I have thoughts. I really love documentary and the power of documentary, especially ones like this. Because we've talked with other filmmakers in the festival about how not everyone learns by reading and writing. A lot of us, like including myself, I learn by audio visual way. So yeah, I'm very excited. I'm a TikToker. I love TikTok. A lot of people are documenting a lot of historic events on TikTok, and so I guess for students, people thinking about going into documentary making, I don't think it's that far-fetched to go from being a TikToker to being a documentarian, because
TikTokers are making themselves known, and they are massive to the political process in the United States, and they are awesome. So I love the TikTokers.
Definitely. And we have I think a lot of people are saying, it's Gen Z, they're the revolution, but I think that there's a lot more resources, and it's a lot easier for us to communicate and organize with things like TikTok, so that TikTokers could organize to make fun of Trump, basically, if we're all talking about the same thing.
Which we are.
Yeah, so it's really encouraging to see, and I think that, I really support what you said about it. It can be small or it can be big, whatever. It's still, storytelling is really a part of like our ancestry, especially as like Polynesian people. It's a huge part of our ancestry to be story makers, storytellers. So yeah, if you want to do that through TikTok, do it. You've got a minute max. Got a minute maximum to tell a story. So yeah, it's really cool. I feel like documentaries really mobilize people. A lot of people are learning from documentaries at the moment how they can support the Black Lives Matter movement, and yeah, it's good to I love documentary, and this one because I personally was a bit invested having an incredibly conservative Christian family, but also a family that's heavy into tourism. So I was like, ooh, two big ones. Yeah, I thought it was fascinating. Fascinating, it's a window into people's lives that we otherwise would never have.
Right.
So yeah, thanks for your documentary.
That
Thank
was
you.
really nice.
Cool. Okay, well, we're just past time, but really want to thank you, Monica Longross, Amy Ellison, for not only this session, but all of the sessions that you've joined us for. Please also convey our thanks to Clayton there. We've really enjoyed showing We Believe in Dinosaurs. These are big, controversial topics, which usually only surface for people later into adulthood. So we're very grateful to you for bringing us the opportunity to start these conversations with young people early. Would also like to again thank the Ray Foundation. I'd like to thank everybody at Docu for making this possible. But yeah, we'll have a little something for you both and for Clayton as well as a way of thanks for participating. Really, really appreciate it.
Talking to you. It's been great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for having us.
Fantastic. Okay, well, you have a lovely evening, I guess, and stay safe, stay well, and we hope things become a little bit smoother for everyone towards the path of justice and science in the States in the coming months.
I believe.
Interesting times, which is, an Irish curse, you live in interesting times. That's what we're going through.
That was everybody's curse.
Every crisis is opportunity, as they say. Okay, well, you guys have a lovely evening. We'll catch up soon.
Good morning.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.